Welcome, football fans, but most importantly, USFL fans, to episode 24 of USFLA. I believe I got that right. I think it is episode 24. Oh, man. We are joined by myself, Ace, Webb, my wonderful co-host, our guest for the day, Leaux from Breaker Nation, and, of course, our wonderful producer, KB, is behind the scenes. You can't see her, but you may hear her. So, boys, what are we talking about today?
USFL 50, right?
We're counting down. Dude, I absolutely love that we did this. For anybody who does not know, the NFL does the NFL Top 100 every offseason. All the players vote, and they come together with the top 100 players in the NFL for the season. So they were doing that after season one, and Chris Rowland, wide receiver for the Philadelphia Stars, he said, man, I really think that they should do this for the USFL. Our guy Webb here, he saw that, and he said, I'm totally in. And he decided he wanted to put extra work into the offseason, and he wanted people to send him ballots for their top 50 players in the USFL from the last season. And he puts them all together and does all the work that goes into that, which I'm glad I don't have to do. But we're into the second time doing it, and I'm very excited because I feel like this year people were more ready for the list. What do you think?
Yeah, the list, it was easier this year than last year. Last year was all over the place. This year there was more of a consensus, but the list turned out great. I believe the Stallions have the most, which is the way it should be. And then I think the Maulers and Breakers are next, right behind them. It's pretty balanced out. I love this list, actually. After looking at it, I'm like, man, we kind of hit it out of the park. So only Ace and I know the whole list. So I'm just excited to get it going because I know the players love this. Obviously we're going to release 8 today, but yes. Buck already released polling number 50. I'll break the news, right? But every day from here on out until the next episode, we release it on Twitter. So people that don't follow the show get it every day. And we tag the player and everything. And sometimes you remember Mark Thompson. Mark Thompson asked if we were high.
I brought it up on my show.
We were high when we had him at like 44 last year.
Yeah.
And then Boogie came on my show and he was like, I want to be on that list next year. He wasn't even on the list. So
he was not last year. He was on it this year, I believe. Yeah. I don't remember where, but here, let me check real quick because I brought it up on my show earlier because I think it's my favorite response we've ever got. Yes, number 43. Last year I posted number 43 was Mark Thompson. He did not like it. He did not repost it, retweet it at the time. Nothing. All he did was he commented and he said, y'all hi. And I thought that was the funniest thing. And it's to this day my favorite interaction with a player. And he retweeted it recently because I think he knew the USFL 50 was coming up. And he was like, y'all are still high. But we're not as high this offseason. I promise, Mark. Logan, Leaux, my guy. I want to know. I don't think you did a list last year because you said you weren't prepared. You weren't ready. You were like, I wasn't paying attention. This year you put together a list. Did you find it easier? Were you thinking about it throughout the season?
I didn't think about it as much throughout the season, just because I was so honed in on the actual season. But last year I sat down and started to want to do it, but I started from 50 down, and I was just like, I don't even know where to begin, and it was kind of late, so I was just like, man, I'm just not gonna do it. I don't want to give a half-butted list. And then this year I was just like, all right, let me start from 1 and work my way down.
Easier. Yeah.
And I was like, obviously Magoo and you work down. And it wasn't super easy. I had to come back to it a couple of times and move some guys and rearrange and do some stuff. But once I got the core of it, it wasn't too bad. You just kind of take guys that are all USFL, and then you can kind of look at stats a little bit and kind of know some guys that deserve to be on there, So, I mean, it's not too hard.
I agree that, one, it's much easier to start at number 1 and move down than to go 50 up. That's much harder of a task. Going 1 down, it's easier, but it's also interesting. Webb, what's your favorite thing of tallying the ballots? Because mine is seeing the differences in people's mindsets and their thought process.
Yeah, you could tell some people, like kickers, for instance. Some
Mhm.
people had 2 kickers on their list. I'm going to tell you personally, I didn't have one. I didn't have a punter. I didn't have a kicker. I did not have it. So I had more offensive line than most people. Some people only had like 4 or 5. Some people had like 7 or 8. Defense. I'm a defensive guy. I know my list was defensive heavy. It just was. Quarterbacks this year, less quarterbacks on the list. I will let you know.
Interesting.
Last year, I think we had Cookus, we had Jamar, we had Slaughter, we had Tiamu, we had yada yada
Yeah.
yada. This year, I don't know the exact number, and we're not going to give it away right now, but I think
I
there's
don't
only
know the
3.
exact number.
Yeah, there's only a handful of quarterbacks on the list. Running backs, wide receiver, the list is more balanced with positions this year, and I think it's because people were prepared and were paying attention, and we start to learn the names of some guys that were like offensive line guys that came back.
Yeah.
Genesee, perfect example for Houston. Like his name. I know he won all USFL, but you start to learn these guys' names over time, and I think that's part of it.
I agree. One of the big things was we had, we always have players and then coaches and GMs. And one of the GMs, you pointed out as soon as I sent you the list, he had a punter in his top 30.
Yeah.
And I think that is, these are guys who are looking at the game as a complete whole. And he says, this guy, he pinned us in the 10 every time. And so he had a punter in his top 30 when a lot of ballots didn't have a single punter on it.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, it really shows you what people are looking at when they're playing the game. And I think it's cool. I think it's very interesting and I enjoy it. But
the 23 ballots, before we move on, 23
Okay.
ballots were counted. 13 were people that cover the league. 2
Like
were
us.
fans. 2 were absolute fans. The people that don't create content, nothing, just people that are real passionate about the league. 4 were players, and 4 were either coaches or GM. So, and before we go too far, who ended up number 1 got 21 out of the 23 first place votes. Just to let you know. Which is crazy because he actually got a less percentage than Turpin did last year. So
Turpin, only one person didn't vote Turpin last year, and it was you. You voted my guy
Turpin at number
Chris
2.
Odom.
Yeah,
you voted my guy Chris Odom, which I agree with. I'm ashamed I didn't vote Chris Odom, but that's okay. All right. So without further ado, do we want to get into it?
Yeah, let's go. Number 50.
Let's do it. Number 50. Quentin Poling. This is I like this pick a lot. And I think it's an interesting pick. Why do you think it's an interesting pick? Leaux, do you know why?
He didn't. Did he play every? He didn't play every game, did he?
Dude, no. This is why I find it interesting. He didn't finish the season in the league. No, nothing. No, nobody knew that.
I didn't know that.
So Scooby Wright, he was hurt. Quentin Poling came in and he filled in for him, and he was just lights out. He was doing fantastic. As soon as Scooby Wright came off of, I think it was the week before Scooby Wright came off of the injury, you have to do 5 weeks or whatever, and he was campaigning to try to get back in. The week before he came back, Quentin Poling was released from the team. He didn't even end the season on the team. He doesn't even get the ring or whatever for season 2, getting the championship.
I think I remember him getting like that added to the suspended list thingy.
Yep.
And then getting, so.
He left the team. He wasn't even on the team.
Yeah.
So I don't know why. He won Defensive Player of the Week, and then the next week he was suspended from the team. So he's a very interesting one, but he 100% he showed out and he filled in for Scooby Wright, helped them win games, and he deserves to be on this list. Number 50. Hey man, you made the list. You didn't even finish in the league at the end of the season, but you made the list. That's awesome.
He had a 3-week period where he was pretty good, really good, one of the best linebackers in the league. And I think that carried him.
He was up for Defensive Player of the Week twice, I want to say, in a 3-week period.
Yeah, he had 41 tackles, 1 interception, 2.5 sacks.
Yeah.
A solid season for the middle linebacker spot. Obviously, he kind of replaced Scooby when Scooby went out, so he didn't play the full season, like you said. But he put up solid numbers, and I think it's number 50. And from tallying up all the ballots, number 50 becomes so dicey because I start weighing who's not on a ballot and who is on a ballot. And he really got carried based off that a lot of people had him right around 50. So that actually helped him more than someone leaving him completely off. And then let's say another guy had he was ranked 31st for other people. You get what I'm saying? So him actually being on the ballot helped him more than being high up on the list. But what do you think, Lo?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys said, he shredded the league apart for a couple of weeks there, and even though he didn't, I think it's fair that he didn't. Well, it all depends on where people vote, right? But I think if you just kind of like take a step back and look at it, for him to be 50, where he tore the league up for a couple of weeks, he didn't play the full season, but he did enough. Like he did enough to be on there. Maybe not high up there, like if he would have played a full season, but he did enough to at least be on there. So I mean, I think 50 is fair, and it makes sense for the situation too.
Yeah, no, I like the pick. Man, to literally be on people's radars for just a few weeks and get on the list. How impressive is that? Imagine a whole season. He should come over to the Gamblers. Whatever.
Number 49.
Right. Number 49.
Shamarius Gilmore from the Philadelphia Stars, offensive line, which is crazy to think because the Stars always have that reputation of not having a great offensive line.
The worst offensive line.
He was all USFL, I believe, wasn't he? Or all USFL Network, whatever he was.
Yeah,
he was on at least one of them.
He wasn't on the all USFL list.
He was on. I believe he was on ours. He was on our all USFL list for United Football Media, and he was consistently showed up on the top 5 graded players on the Stars for PFF. It's a big reason that he made it onto this list.
Yeah. And I mean, like, you can have a bad offensive line, but that doesn't mean every offensive lineman on there is bad, like maybe collectively as a unit, they were probably dead last, but yeah, I mean, he was highly graded, and he was either left tackle or right tackle.
I believe he was a guard.
Yeah,
was he a guard?
He's not a tackle.
Is he not?
I believe he was center.
Okay, what? We're all different places right now. But
Demarius Gilmore.
We're gonna find it, but regardless, but yeah, I mean, he's highly graded, and I think that probably helped him get some love.
He's a guard.
List. Guard.
Okay, yeah, he is a guard. Yeah, my bad.
So
obviously I watched smaller games, and when they were able to get to Cookus, it was from the outside. It was from the tackles. They were getting by the tackles. They weren't. It wasn't Boogie and Olive except once or twice. And the interior side of that Philadelphia Stars offensive line seemed to get better as the season went on. I know Cookus was taking an abuse at the beginning of the season. It was a little bit better towards the end. So
yes. Also, they weren't running it straight up the middle. It was a lot of screens, and it was a lot of they were running it more up the middle. Their outside stuff was not working that well.
Yeah.
All the teams that were playing them, they were able to contain pretty easy. Cookus wasn't scrambling the way he was in season 1. It was a lot of the tackles were just not up to par, whereas the center and guards were a little bit better this season, and it showed. Shamarius was good. He was genuinely good. If you go back and watch the games, because I wanted to make sure when I was picking these people, just because PFF grades them well, doesn't mean they were like that good. So I would go and look at some stuff, look at some footage, and yes, the interior O-line of the Stars was decent, especially going later on into the season. They got better. I know that they didn't make it to the playoffs, but they were looking a lot better until they met that Panthers defense that was just kind of pretty good. So whatever.
Ready for the next one?
I'm so ready. Let's go. 48.
Jay Adams.
Man. Why we shouldn't even open our mouths, Webb. Let's just let my guy Leaux talk about this guy.
All right. I feel like it's only fitting if I grab the Jay Adams figure for the no, but Jay Adams, I believe, is the only wide receiver in the modern era to have 2 400+ yard seasons. So he was 30 last year.
On the USFL 50. Yeah,
USFL 50. He was number 30
last year. I think early on he was kind of quiet. Sage Surratt got a lot of the love, and Johnny Dixon got a lot of the love. But when Johnny Dixon went down, Jay Adams really started to get a lot of looks, and he started to kind of like show people who he was again and remind people. And he had a quiet 400-yard season. I think he was like 5th or 6th in yards.
500-yard season. Yeah.
He had a 500-yard season.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was somewhere like 5 or 6 in receiving yards, and even I was a little bit shocked when I went and saw that. So he had a quietly good season. He took a bit of a fall in the list, but I think, I think he balled out and had a quiet, underrated season. So I'm happy with it.
I agree. I'll go. I think he was kind of the curse of competency where it wasn't touchdowns and it wasn't one-handed grabs this season. He was a lot more catching balls over the middle and being just a consistent target for McLeod Bethel-Thompson. Like you said, they had Sage Surratt, they had Johnny Dixon, and these guys were making some really impressive catches and getting in the end zone, whereas Jay Adams he shifted from the big play guy to being a consistent receiver that MBT could just drop down to, could throw screens to, and could just get the ball to. And I think that while he had just as productive as a season, honestly, it wasn't as flashy. And I think that's why he fell in the list, because I don't think he necessarily deserved to be this low, but it wasn't as impressive as the one-handed catch against the Bandits last year. He won the game against Gamblers in the second time that they showed or that they met last season. He caught the ball in the end zone over Jamar Summers. He's had these big plays that were showy and flashy, and everybody was talking. They were like, Jay Adams, this guy's amazing. This season, he was just much more consistent. He was just a good receiver, just consistent and not flashy. And that hurt him, which sucks, but it happens,
The crazy thing is he had less targets this year than last year.
More receiving yards.
And he had 10 more receptions. 2 touchdowns compared to 3 last year. 41 catches compared to 31 catches, so he actually improved quite a bit. And about 105 more yards. I'm shocked that he's this low.
I am too.
I think he's one of the more consistent wide receivers. I think it's more that he became a victim of people knowing the defensive tackles and the defensive linemen and the offensive linemen and adding them to the list. And he kind of,
yeah.
I don't know where he stands in the wide receiver. Like if you rank them just off the wide receivers on this list, but I think there's less receivers this year, and he kind of became a victim and kind of came down. But Jay Adams is one of the all-time greats for these 2 years, without a doubt.
I can understand that now this year people are getting to know more names. Yep. So he's falling into much more of a melting pot of just trying to figure out what your top 50 is. So maybe he fell down a little lower. I understand that.
I also think a good part of it too is it happens in the NFL a lot, is like when a guy pops up, like when a Jalen Hurts pops up and has a really good year, you see a guy like Lamar start to kind of slowly back away. And then like Trevor Lawrence has a good year, you see Lamar start to fall in the rankings, where these new faces pop up, like a Corey Coleman pops up and a Davion Davis pops up, and these new fresh names, and they have really good years and they pop up. And then like a guy like Jay Adams kind of gets pushed back a little bit because
who is still doing as well.
Who's still doing really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm not going to say he had as good as a year as them, but I'm just saying when the new names come in and they're fresh and they're flashy,
they're going to jump over them.
Exactly.
I get that. All right. Who we got for 47 though? Another breaker. Oh my gosh. Lo, why do you think we had you on the show tonight? It's because it's the breaker show for USFL 50. We have Henri St. Amour. Look at that graphic. That is a fun guy. He posed for it. Great time.
It's interesting because I thought last year Davin Bellamy got a lot of the love, which, he had the 3 sacks in the first game, and it was fun, and he was, trash talking. But I thought last year St. Amour was really quiet and had a really solid season, especially as a run defender. And I thought that, this year he got some more sacks, but he also was super good in the run defense again. And like, nobody really talked about him. They talked about Shad a little bit on our interior defensive line. A lot of guys like Boogie and Toby got a lot of the love again, but St. Amour had another quiet, really good season and improved upon last year. And so I'm happy to see him on the list. I'm happy to see him get some love from the community. So
Well, I don't think he was on the list last year, was he,
wasn't.
Webb?
No, he
Yeah.
wasn't.
So he wasn't on the list last year. He didn't have that much better of a season this year. He was just as good in the run defense, but he had the 6 sacks, which is big. If you get sacks, your name gets out there, right? Davin Bellamy, let's be completely honest. This man didn't do anything in the second half of the season last year. He really wasn't that big of a, person. He didn't interfere with the quarterback that much. He slowed way down. A person like Henri St. Amour is consistent throughout the season. They're really helping with the run defense, making the quarterback throw more. But the fact that he was able to get more sacks this season helped him get his name out there. People were started talking about him, and that's how he got on our list. He probably deserved to be on the list both years, if we're going to be completely honest. But he's in one of those positions that people just aren't paying as much attention to. Honestly, Keontae Shad, nobody paid attention to him either. Both of them were doing very well, and I'm just glad one of them got on this list. Maybe Keontae Shad later. I don't know if he did.
I love St. Amour. I think he's a perfect defensive end for this league. 6 sacks this year compared to 2 last year.
Yeah.
But he had less tackles overall. I think he's
only 30.
A key cog on that defense for Tenuta. And I think he's perfectly placed. I'm glad he's on this list. There's really not much to add because he's perfectly placed. Like, there's no argument to be made. So
yeah. I mean, how are you going to fight against the guy who covers the Breakers like no other? We got Leaux on this show, man. We can't fight him. This guy knows this team.
The biggest homer this side of Moose Johnson.
Absolutely the biggest homer in this league.
I'll be fighting those allegations for the rest of my life.
Nah, but we love him. It's all good. All right, who's number 46? Let's move on. Dude, Adam Rodriguez. This is a guy who fell in the rankings. Do you think we had a decent number of people fall in the rankings this year, Webb, or do you think a lot more people just came up in the rankings?
I think Leaux was perfect when he said that, like, Adams fell, even though he had a better season because of the guys like Devontae Davis, Davion Davis, and Alex Magoo coming. You know what I mean? Those are the new names.
Wow, we just had new names. Those were the names that were bright, new, shiny.
Well, Adam Rodriguez, first of all, his team didn't do as well as they did last year, so that's part of this one. And to tell you the truth, he had 3 less sacks and 13 less tackles. So it's not like he produced the same numbers either. I'm shocked that he's still on the list. Me personally, out of the top 50, the way I kind of went through the list is, can these guys start for every single team in the league? I don't think Adam Rodriguez can. I would take St. Amour over Adam Rodriguez as that edge guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I would take other guys. Tillman from the Stallions. I would take guys before I take Adam Rodriguez.
You could, I mean, he's still falling into coverage a little bit. He's not a fully standing
he's not
edge rusher.
He's not
he still will fall into coverage. Right, and I think that kind of puts him back a little bit, that when you're falling into coverage, you're not getting interceptions because you're just a linebacker covering, sometimes a tight end or a running back coming out of the backfield. And the thing people really are looking at him for is the sacks.
Yeah.
And he had a great year this year, but he didn't improve that much. And to stay up with, like you guys are saying, you have new names coming up. We had Reuben Foster as a new linebacker in the league. You got to be big if you're going up against these kind of names that are coming into this league at your position, that it makes sense that he would fall on the list. Now, it is impressive that he fell literally 20 spots. He went 46 last season. He was 26. That's a big fall for a guy who had a better season. That's crazy.
No, he had 13 less tackles this year and 3 less sacks. Henri St. Amour.
Their defense was so bad this season.
If you just compare those numbers, Henri St. Amour should be ahead of Adam Rodriguez. That defense was better. Leaux will argue that was the best defense in the league. He's out of his mind, but
not even close. But
Adam Rodriguez really took a step back. I know he had a couple games I know against the Maulers, he hit the quarterback and then came back and caused a fumble in the same exact play on the wide receiver, and he's an animal, but he did take a step back.
He's a beast. Their defense as a whole fell.
I think his name actually carried him onto this list more than others.
Okay. I can see that. I'm man enough to admit that's my bad.
I think him being, it's one of those things where the pass rushers this year, like the thing that hurt Jay Adams is the opposite in this situation for him, because there wasn't as many new flashy pass rushers that came through. So a lot of people were probably like, Rodriguez, oh, that guy was good last year, which he was still good this year. I mean, we had 3 guys that were tied for third in sacks. It was St. Amour, Rodriguez, and Mataafa. They all had 6 sacks on the dot. I mean, yeah, his numbers took a step back, so it makes sense for him to fall.
Oh, no, you're right. Wow. The fact that you just pulled all 3 of the tied for third in sacks.
I know that. I don't know why I know that one, but
impressive.
I know that one really well.
I'm impressed.
No, but I mean, yeah, I think if you could, I know the ballot, it kind of fluctuates, but yeah, I mean, it would make sense to have St. Amour above him, but it is what it is. But I mean, he did have a good year. He's one of the top pass rushers in the league, regardless of whether he took a step back or not. It also, sometimes it can hurt guys when you have a good year, especially as a pass rusher. When you have a good year or a good stretch, and then teams take notice of that, they're not going to let you get those singles, those one-on-ones. They're going to start chipping and doubling, and if you're really good, triple teaming you. So that could also play a factor into it. But I mean, I think
you hold them at a higher standard the next year, right? So Adam Rodriguez had a fantastic year last year. He had a great year this year. It was still a very, very good year. But because he was that much better last year, he's going to fall. So I get that. And think about it. Adam Rodriguez falls 20 spots. Henri St. Amour got on the list, and he's only a spot behind him. That's pretty impressive. That's a lot of movement right there, and good for St. Amour. But let's move on. Who do we have next? We have number 45. Wow, we're moving through this faster than I thought. Who is number 45? It is Levante Taylor. Oh, I wish my brother was on here to talk about this. So throughout the season, my brother kept talking about, nobody will talk about it, but we have the best corners in the league. And I was like, dude, I don't know who you're talking about. He was like, dude, Ace. My brother Maverick kept saying, Ace, we have some of the best corners in this league.
He called you
like,
Ace?
No.
He called you Ace?
Oh, of course not. But I'm going to say that for the show. Okay. But he said, Ace, we have some of the best corners in the league. And I was like, I don't think so. And I was like, I think the Maulers have the best corners. I said, I honestly think that, there's some good defenses. And he said, no, dude, you need to watch Josh Butler, and you need to watch Levante Taylor. I said, okay. By the end of the season, they were up there. That was pretty much the second best corner room in the league. Can you say anything different?
I think they'd be up there.
Yeah, they'd be up there, but I think
they're about second.
The 2 teams we represent, me and Leaux, I think have an argument to be made of being
I get that.
in the top 2.
I tell you what,
I get that. Neville Clark, legit.
It's really weird with corners. This happened to me last year, and I'll say this: I don't really realize it's the little things. Like I had a corner from our team this year tell me, he was like, "Bro, I didn't give up a touchdown, and I only gave up like 2 catches." And they track their stats.
No one talks about them. No one talks about
exactly. And I won't even notice because they don't really track those stacks, but those guys do. They know it because they watch every piece of film, but I don't. And like, it's not on Fox Sports. Like, oh, this corner gave up 1 catch. This corner gave up 15. But
I wish they showed how many plays they were in. That is honestly very telling, especially for positions like corner and safety.
I would put our 2 up there, Adonis and Clark. I would put them not as like 1, but I think they would be somewhere in that 3, 2, 4
in about
range.
the 2-3 range. Agreed.
I think that's fair. Neither of them gave up a touchdown. It was pretty much all from our safeties. So
I'm not saying Levante Taylor doesn't deserve to be on this list, but he did have 40 tackles, which is a lot for a guy that never gave up anything, right? Like he that's a lot of tackles, and I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Or are they playing zone and he's just the guy right next to the zone and he's getting the tackle?
Yeah.
But 4
it's
tackles
also
a
against
game, like Ike Brown last year.
Line that wasn't the same.
Ike Brown last year had like 18 tackles because no one threw to his side. They're throwing at least to Levante Taylor's side or area where he's getting tackles. I think Levante Taylor's reputation and his persona carried him onto this list a little bit more than what we're saying. Was he good?
No,
yes,
I agree. I agree.
But is he top 50? I don't know. I don't even remember if I had him on the list. I'm going to be honest with you.
I don't know if I did either.
He had 0 interceptions. At least Ike Brown last year had 2 interceptions, 1 took to the house. Levante Taylor had no interceptions and 39 tackles. That's a lot of tackles for a corner that didn't get thrown at.
Okay, I think a lot of it though was also that he was covering people like Corey Coleman. He's covering Eccles Looper. He's covering these. There was a little bit better receivers, at least wide receiver one in the North that I can think of right now. But he was covering these guys, and I think a lot of it was, like you're saying, his reputation and his name. Later in the season, he was making plays, especially on the primetime games. The Panthers were playing the late night games. They played in the playoffs, and Levante Taylor was making plays. People were seeing those plays, and I think that was a big part of it.
Well,
so I can agree with you.
I think part of it too is when you take a step back, 40 tackles is a good bit, but that's only 4 a game if you think about it, because there's 10 games, and if some corners are just more aggressive than others when it comes to tackling and to stepping up into those positions. And you also got to think he had 4 games, 2 against the Maulers, 2 against the Generals. Both of those teams run the ball a lot. So that's way more opportunities to make tackles than some other guys might get. So that he's a more aggressive corner when it comes to tackling. He's not afraid to tackle. And he had 4 games against teams that run the ball a good majority of the time.
True. They could just be running the ball to his side, and he's not afraid to stick his nose in there.
That's fine.
Low, fantastic point.
That's why we brought him on for this episode.
I like corners, man. I was one. Come on.
That's fine.
All right, so let's move on. We got number 44. We only have 2 players left.
Yeah.
I thought we were moving really slow, but we're moving faster. Number 44, our first kicker on the list, and this is the guy who set the record for the number of field goals made in a game. It was 8, I believe.
Yep.
Oh, dude. And I like this picture because I feel like it was just a moment where he was like, I'm about to nail this kick. And I just liked it. I like Luis Aguilar, and I thought these pictures were cool. I especially like the one where he won the game against the Generals?
Yep.
It was against the Generals, yeah. And they all just lifted him up, and I made sure I got that on there. Oh, I love this graphic.
Can we take a second to just talk about the graphics in general and how fire they are?
Thank you.
Those are really, really good graphics.
It's probably your best work, honestly.
Well, thank you. Other than my slam ball stuff, that's probably about the best I've done for USFL. Yeah.
If I may, I'm a big fan of kickers. I've come to really enjoy specialists in general.
We know Matt Coughlin. You are in that man's corner.
I love money cogs, man. I actually had Cogs and Louis Aguilar both on my list, but I had Aguilar a little bit ahead of him. So, but yeah, I mean, 8 kicks in a game is crazy. Especially the game winner, which was like a 50-something yarder. It was a 54? Good 54. It was somewhere in that 50-plus range, which is, I mean, it's hard enough to hit a game-winning kick regardless, but especially when you're in the 50-plus range and you've already made 7 kicks in a game, that's pretty tough. So, yeah, he did good for them. He helped them float, honestly. I mean, he had a good chunk of kicks against us, too. They beat us 16-10, and I think – he had like 3 kicks against us. So yeah.
Luis was pretty legit.
I think in this league with the return kicks where you're getting the ball to the 40, having a guy that can kick it from 50 yards is even more important than the NFL, because I think you have more drives that could end up there. You're not starting at your own 20 like a touchback, and you got to go 40 yards first. You only have to go 15, 20 yards, and you're already in field goal range. You're close to field goal range. Aguilar was great. I don't know if he deserves to be in the top 50. I know I'm going to be controversial there.
What?
Because I think Cogs, unless Cogs is on this list, unless Aubrey's on the list, Blewett had every big kick. He nailed every big kick except that one against the Gamblers. I really feel like it's tough to say. I didn't put any kickers on the list, so I guess I'm.
What? I know I had both Aubrey. May have had Aubrey, Aguilar, and Coughlin. I know I thought about Coughlin. I don't know if he made it on. I don't remember.
Coughlin would be my guy if I had one on the list, honestly.
Dude, Brandon Aubrey. I knew Aubrey had to make it on there for 2 seasons of having just ice in the man's veins. But Aguilar, I mean, let's say this. If Blewett had made that kick against the Gamblers, he probably takes the spot from Aguilar. Low?
If Blewett?
Yeah, if Blewett made that kick against the Gamblers, then he would have been almost perfect on the season. He probably takes the spot from Aguilar.
That's true. I think the 8 kicks in the game is what's carrying Aguilar right now.
Yeah, that is, it's 100% legit. Because later in the season, he did miss some ones that he needed to hit.
Because I was going to say, Coughlin was the most accurate kicker in the league. He only missed one kick.
Period. I saw him tweet about it the other day, and I was like, all right,
also did
Leaux been telling me these stats.
Yeah, did Aguilar do kickoffs? I don't remember. Probably.
No. He did a little bit, but when they brought in that new guy, I remember. Or something like that.
I know he did some punting because I know I put it on this graphic.
Yeah.
But yes.
I remember when we played the Maulers, Coughlin he punted like 3 times, and I was like, oh no.
But that's week 1.
It was. No, it was crazy. I was like, please do good on this. I was like,
actually, he gave up Penny's return punt for a touchdown on his kick.
That's not his fault. That's not his fault. That coverage was shoddy at best.
If he just kicked it out of the end zone, Henny wouldn't have got it. But, Aguilar deserves to be on the list, I guess. I didn't have kickers, so I'm anti-kicker.
Dude, you had like 6 offensive linemen, and you have no kickers on your list?
Yeah, I think they only
I had like 5 offensive linemen, and I think I had 3 kickers.
They don't play as much, so I hold it against them.
I think kickers are so important in this league.
Points are at a premium in this league.
Oh,
they literally won that game off of Aguilar's leg. They didn't score a single touchdown. It was all Aguilar. 8 touchdowns. That was 8 kicks. That was all they had.
We got more touchdowns this year than we did last year, I'm pretty sure. But even then, we still are at like a lack of touchdowns compared to like the NFL or college. So like kickers are way more important because there's a lot of stalled drives in this league, man. So
100%. I don't remember. I didn't actually look at the touchdown number.
I would almost guarantee that it was. I mean, we had 2 running backs that combined for darn near 25 touchdowns, both of them, and then we had multiple quarterbacks with 10+ touchdowns. Where last year we only had 1, I think. So it's got to be way higher touchdowns this year than last year. It's got to be.
I feel like we had less receiving touchdowns this year. Maybe it's just me. I feel like we did.
Because your team didn't throw touchdowns. That's
whatever, dude. Because we had
either did the Maulers, man. We only
we didn't need to.
We only got 6.
Magoo's like 20 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I think
carried like half the leagues.
Slaughter had like 11 last year, and
Slaughter had 9. Slaughter had 9. Tamu had 12, and those were the top 2 QBs. So yeah, we only had 1 guy with 10+ last year, and we had like 5 this year or 4. So
all right. Well, we're going to our last guy on the list, and this is a harder one to talk about.
Yeah.
It is Calvin Ashley, who is a tackle for the New Jersey Generals. One, we don't have a Generals person in our group. We don't call ourselves a network anymore. What do you guys say? We're a
UFM.
Just part of the UFM. You don't say like, oh, part of the group. Like, I don't know, whatever. But we don't have a Generals person, so it's not like we had someone who was watching their offensive line the entire year. The fact that he made the list is very impressive for a group that literally doesn't have somebody who watches that team consistently. But the fact that they never had a consistent quarterback, they were either starting Laletta, Prukup, or Johnson, and they were still at least in games. I know that they were last in the league, but they were in most games. And Vito was still having a good season. So their offensive line was not the problem, you know?
Yeah. He was all USFL, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Yes, 100%.
I think that probably helped him get on the list. I think some people were kind of like, oh, let me get some all USFL, guys on there, and they see the linemen, which is fair because I'm pretty sure coaches and players and stuff vote on the all USFL. So, I mean,
they do.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I mean, they had a revolving door of quarterback all year, but they still ran the ball pretty well. I think their ability to run the ball kind of kept them in games and also having a solid defense. So, I mean, I can't argue with it. I mean, he's all USFL. I think it's fair that he's on here.
Yeah, I don't think the offensive line was the problem. I think the quarterback decision-making was the problem this year. They didn't have the Luis Perez kind of guy. Prukup comes in, and they kind of bench him, whatever. Calvin Ashley, he replaced Terry Poole, right? Which is kind of a big deal because Terry Poole was like one of the guys last year that everyone knew the offensive line. They ended up releasing Terry Poole. New Jersey pumps out offensive line guys. I think we're
For
going to
some
see
reason,
more.
Dabney gets good offensive line.
Yeah. Steve Smith, the offensive coordinator, is an offensive line coach, which is a weird combination for an offense coordinator.
That is strange.
When you watch them play, you can see it makes sense.
Yeah. And Vito had a solid year. I know Trey Williams did not have a solid year, but they were able to run the ball. Their quarterbacks and sometimes their defense let them down. And they went 3-7. So you're talking they're 1 or 2 wins away from winning the East, or 1 win from tying for the East. And unbelievable. Even though they had the worst record in the USFL.
Their offense looked bad.
Their offense did look bad, but they were able to hang in a lot of games, and I don't think it's Ashley's fault of the reason why they went 3-7.
I agree. Their offensive line was not bad. It wasn't that the run game wasn't there. Their defense, you said sometimes their defense would give it up. I think they had one of the better defenses. They had a couple games where they were missing both Chris Orr and Shalom. So it's hard. But it was never their offensive line. That was never the problem. It was, like you're saying, the QB decision making. They didn't have a Louis Pettit.
Kavontae Turpin. Like,
they didn't have Kavontae Turpin.
That's a big deal.
A guy who can you can give an end around and he might take it for a touchdown.
Yeah.
That you can throw it up to him and he's going to burn past the secondary. Not just that. You don't have Louis Pettit. You don't have a guy who's accurate, who's just very accurate and makes sound decisions. That's not going to turn the ball over. You have Dakota Prukup, who's kind of a mix. He can run, he can throw, but it's not super accurate. You have DeAndre Johnson, who's not accurate at all. You have Kyle Loletta, who is a statue in the pocket. They didn't have somebody who was just a solid, get the ball to the receiver the way that Luis Perez was. And that wasn't their offensive line's fault. Calvin Ashley was a solid guy, filled in for Terry Poole, which is wildly impressive. And he deserves to be on this list. I'm glad he made it.
One thing, Eric Barrier next year.
Dude, the fact that he didn't – okay, so he made it on one of the lists. Though I don't know if you know this. He was on a USFL 50 list.
Yeah.
That dude didn't play a snap this season.
That doesn't shock me. He's a fan favorite. People love him.
He didn't play.
Actually, I think the guy to look out for them is Adrian Martinez, but that's just me. Their draft pick from last year.
If he comes onto the team, he's got to join
the team. That's what I'm saying. That's a guy that I would look – I don't know what camp he's in right now, but that'd be a guy to look into. On that whole front, I think – They just didn't pick a guy. I also know DeAndre got hurt for a couple of games, and that didn't really help.
It was a scary injury that took him out for a while.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was. I think he had a head injury or something.
Adrian
the revolving
the Lions.
Yeah,
he's not making that roster. He's not making that. The revolving door of quarterback. I also just think the offense in general is just kind of like. I'm personally not a fan of it. I don't know. I think it's very run heavy. Let's rely on our defense. And the problem is some of these offenses, like it worked last year because a lot of these offenses really struggled. And then this year you had a lot of offenses take a step up across the league, and quarterback play took a step up across the league. So then when you're that team that's like, hey, let's play defense. First of all, your defense kind of took a step back, not a huge step back, but it took a step back. And then you got the revolving door of quarterbacks, and you're trying to do this run first. Let's play defense, and then everybody
your top receivers are Eccles, Looper, and Alonzo Moore.
I thought actually
awesome.
I thought their receivers were decent.
They were decent, but they're not. They're not up to the level.
Well, it's just the offense. They're not going to put up gaudy numbers in that type of offense. No receiver is really. I mean, Turpin put up solid numbers, but even then, if you look at it right now, like Turpin's receiving numbers last year, he'd probably be like 5th right now, like 5th or 6th in the league.
Probably.
So Turpin was the big play.
It was also the return
that's really
as well.
It wasn't consistent. It wasn't consistent drive. Making plays, it was take it to the house kind of plays.
That's what it's just the offensive scheme, really. I think that's more. It's the revolving door of quarterbacks, which you have to let a guy settle in. Like you got to just stick with a guy, and like there's a difference between a guy being like 0-15 on pass attempts and just like way out of there. But if a guy shows you some flashes, let him stick. But when you keep pulling guys left and right, they can't catch a rhythm. They can't catch a rhythm with their receivers. They can't catch the timing. They can't settle into the game flow. They can't settle into looking at the defense. There's a lot that goes into it. When you keep pulling guys, it's just like it resets their mind and not in a good way. So
I agree with that entirely. You got to let them get into a groove.
Well, it's crazy that he had the revolving door all season, Mike Riley, and then the biggest game of the year for them in Week 10 against the Maulers, he just lets DJ go, and DJ struggled, and he didn't bench him, or
And he never
didn't do
pulls
anything.
him.
He did nothing with him.
It was
at that point,
it
it's
was
just too late.
questionable decisions.
Yeah, but
towards
if
the
they
end.
win that game, they're in the playoffs, and that was the one time of the year where he didn't pull him as soon as he makes a mistake, or we're gonna do something different. It just was weird. I don't know.
It was tough, but Calvin Ashley was a solid part of that offense. And as a whole, what do you guys feel about 50 through 43? Do you feel that this is a solid list so far? Because I feel like it's more put together than last year.
I think it's pretty solid.
It's solid.
I think it's nice to have a kicker on there. I don't think a kicker has to be like top 10 unless they put up some crazy numbers or do some crazy stuff. But I mean, I think a kicker being on the list is fine. I mean, I think it's fair. The kicking this year was a lot better. I mean, we had a couple offensive linemen sneak on here. We had St. Amour get on there, which I think was fair, deserving. Jay Adams was on there. I think that's fair, deserving. I mean, I like everybody that's been on here so far.
Yeah, the list, after talking about it, I think St. Amour should have been a little bit higher with Adam Rodriguez in front of him. Jay Adams may be a little bit higher, but I don't know where he ranks in the wide receivers because I didn't track that yet. But I think everyone on here deserves to be on the list. I don't see any problems. Like even Poland being number 50 is perfect because he didn't play the whole season, but when he did play, he had great moments. He carried a lot of the Stallions' defense in the middle linebacker role, which is kind of like Scooby. He kind of filled in and he succeeded in it. But this whole list so far is pretty good. I
agree. I like the list, and I am very excited. So everybody who's watching, you're going to see that we are going to release these, the USFL 50. We're going to release it one graphic at a time going for the next 7 days, and we're going to keep doing that for the next 50 days. It's very exciting. We love doing this in the off season. It keeps it interesting. You get to watch it. It's a good time. So I'm very excited. I can't wait to see the rest of the list because I only look at the list to put the graphics together and I try to forget it because I want to be surprised when it's coming up, and I'm excited to see the rest of it with you guys. So can't wait. We're going to try to have a guest on every single week. Leaux, thank you so much for coming on. Yes, someone who voted on the list because we want someone who had a hand in it. So Leaux, thank you so much for being guest number 1. I absolutely loved having you, man. 2 breakers on this one.
Yeah, it was a blast. It was nice to have 2 breakers on there. That was cool. But it's always fun to just talk USFL in general because, like, sometimes I forget how much I know about the league in general. Like, I know I'm a breakers guy, but, to be able to just toss out stats of guys that aren't even on my team, it's like I shock myself sometimes. So I think it's fun to just talk ball. That's all it really is. We're just talking ball, having fun.
I get that. Man, thank you so much for coming on. KB, you've been quiet this whole episode. I know we didn't have a KB blindside, but do you have anything you want to say? How do you like the list?
I think the list is great. I truly don't have a blindside because I think the list is solid.
Heck yeah. Guys, this was a good episode. I can't wait for it to come out. I can't wait for people to react to the list. I love seeing how fans, but not only fans, but players and coaches react to the list because that's a fun one because they have an opinion of where their players should land and where they themselves should land. I can't wait to see that. So that's what I'm most looking forward to. I want to see what the y'all high moment of this list is. Can't wait.
And Maverick will be on next week. That'll be our special guest next week.
All right. Well, I think we've covered it all. Webb, we gonna do it? Oh, let's go. Leaux, throw it up. Throw it up. Come on, there we go.
Hit the music.
Oh, I absolutely love it.